issues happening, and there's been some address by different leadership individuals there, and Charity Mwangi shall be giving us a brief on that, as well as having the sugar bribery probe has been going on, and we have Didmas Barasa, who has just finished being questioned by the Senate committee, which and where he has made some allegations and pointed fingers at specific people, and we shall be giving you details on who these MPs he has singled out, he has mentioned, are in regards to the same. In the county of Homa Bay, we'll have Bernardo Juang, who's going to be giving us some of the views of the Wananchi in regards to the finance bill, the finance bill, which, like I said, is the subject of a lot of discussion. And aside from that, we are also going to be looking at what other people around the country are expecting or are thinking about this whole thing, thinking about the cost of living going higher at a time when pockets are already heavily perforated, according to many. And we shall be getting views from Nakuru with Bridget Ngana, as well as from Nairobi later on with Zacchaeus Mosame. But first, let's look at what's happening in the sports world, and we kick it over to Sean Kadavilis to give us a hint of what's happening. Sean.
Thank you very much, Dan. Good morning to you all. Quite a bit to talk about, especially Champions League football. The new season getting underway last night, match day 1. Some dramatic matches. Tottenham, believe it or not, 85 minutes. They were 1-0 up and end up losing 2-1 to Inter Milan. We'll have the full details on that. Hat-trick for Lionel Messi, who's been controversially left out of the shortlist, of course, for the FIFA Best Player of the Year. He's making himself known on the pitch. A great hat-trick for him on match day 1 of the Champions League. And also Liverpool as well, beating Paris Saint-Germain 3-2. More Champions League matches on tonight. Real Madrid, the 3 times champions, creating history, winning the tournament 3 times in a row. They start life without Cristiano Ronaldo in the Champions League tonight. And of course, Cristiano Ronaldo in action for Juventus, the first time he's playing for Juventus in the Champions League. So there should be some great matches on tonight. Also, the Kenya Premier League continuing today. Gor Mahia, who lost over the weekend, huge problems within the club. Players have been on strike, issues in terms of budgets within the club. They're in action today, and AFC Leopards, of course, losing yesterday. So big problems for some of the biggest clubs in the country. Sports on the way a little bit later on NTV Today.
Thank you very much, Sean. Definitely looking forward to the goals, the gears, and the drives and all that. And now let's cross off the county of Kisumu, where Oko Okusa is standing by. And Okusa, there have been a lot of discussions and debates about who owns Megingo. And aside from that, there has been the concern about security. Are the people there safe enough? We've heard of allegations of there being serious crimes happening there, but not much is being done in regards to security. And that is what the regional commissioner is meant to be speaking about. So, Okusa, over to you to just give us a brief of what's happening.
30 minutes time from now, the regional commissioner, that is Moffat Kangi, has promised to give a brief to the media regarding the latest developments on the controversial Megingo Island. Remember, just last week there was some altercation there when the Kenyan security teams attempted to hoist the country's flag, but it was met with some resistance from the Ugandans, which actually triggered some movement there in terms of the numbers of security personnel from the Ugandan side. Currently, we are speaking of over 40 new police officers who have been deployed there by Uganda to man that island. Kenya, as we speak, has around about 15 police officers stationed on the island. And just last week, around on Thursday, the county commander, the police county commander in Migori County, that is Joseph Nthenge, told journalists that they were working on modalities to ensure that the Kenyan flag is hoisted on that island. That is in line with the government policy that anywhere where there are government establishments, especially those ones that touch on security, there must be a Kenyan flag flying, and therefore insist that even though the attempt has been met by some resistance from the Ugandans, still they are going to hoist that flag because they have a police post on that particular island. And as we speak now, of course, we know that there is sort of some lockdown that, occasioned by the Ugandans' heavy presence on the island. A lot of Kenyans have shied away from operating on that controversial island, fearing harassment from the Ugandans. We are talking of plainclothes officers and also uniformed officers on the island. Again, Dan, remember that all these developments are coming in the wake of a recent tour by the Interior and Coordination CS Fred Matiang'i, who visited Homa Bay and Siaya County and promised that the government was going to sort of put in place a new security plan that is going to involve additional deployment of police officers to enhance security and patrol on the lake. He actually even hinted at a KDF, that is Kenya Defence Forces, involvement in the new security plan. And we are yet to see actually those deployments promised by the CS on the ground. But in the wake of that is when the police in Migori County had made that attempt to hoist the Kenyan flag. Remember, Megingo Island has been a debate that has caused some sort of diplomatic row between Kenya and Uganda over which country owns the island. Remember, Uganda claims to be the bona fide owner of the island, yet Kenya also says that that island is within its borders. And so there have never been an agreement between the two countries who actually supposed to man that particular island. And that has caused some animosity between those two countries. Even the Kenyan fishermen who ply their trade on that island, in a number of instances, have accused the Ugandans of harassing them. At some point, they even claim that the Ugandans confiscate their fishing gear, their boats, and even their catch. Sometimes they even force them to eat raw fish. That is what has been coming out of that island. And they have been blaming the Kenyan government of being sort of lackluster in sorting out this issue. They're saying that the Ugandans have taken over this island, yet the Kenyan government is just sitting and watching, not deploying enough security to give them protection on that particular island. So it is a debate that has been going on. Remember, even some times back, Kenya and Uganda commissioned formed a committee that was supposed to sort out the boundary issues. It did its groundwork, visited the islands, put up some beacons, but that also was just fizzled out like that. It never resolved the issue of Megingo, and therefore that remains unresolved actually as we speak, causing all this animosity and tensions now and again. But recently when Matiang'i came down here, he said he promised that the issue of Megingo is going to be sorted out once and for all, that what Kenya has put in place is going to ensure that the debate or the controversy surrounding that island in terms as far as the ownership is concerned is going to be sorted out once and for all when Kenya steps its authority and put boots on the ground. Dan.
All right, thank you very much, Obusa, for that comprehensive brief on what's happening in the county of Kisumu in regards to Megingo. And now let's cross over to Parliament, where we have the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, that's Henry Rotich, who is before the Finance Committee of the National Assembly, where he's responding to the presidential memorandum, which has been the topic and the subject of a lot of discussion and conflicting views as we go along. Let's listen in.
Yes, he's the one who has computed, and he has come up with a figure that at 16% we are able to collect 35, and therefore it implies that at half we are able to collect around 17.5. If we can confirm that he has taken care of those others, you know, unless you have other information, we can give a benefit of doubt. But let us hear Dawood, then we hear Muthama.
Chair, I think the CS is misleading this committee because he has just said the VAT will be, input VAT will be only on distribution. But what he's not telling us, that if you go to a petrol station today, you are given an ETR receipt. If you are given that ETR receipt, at the distribution point, the price of fuel is less than 90 or 100. At the petrol station, the price of petrol is 127, inclusive of VAT, if I'm right.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Okay. At the distribution point, the VAT element will only be about, let's say, 16 or 15 shillings or 14 shillings.
Yeah.
But when you go, VAT on 127 shillings is about 20 shillings.
Yeah.
Are those petrol stations who are giving you an ETR receipt of 16% or whatever it will be 8%, will they not be able to claim that money? Why are they giving an ETR? Because they will claim that money as input.
Yeah.
So we are not being truthful about it, that the VAT is only on the distribution. It's the whole chain of fuel. correct me if I'm wrong, CS. It's the whole chain.
Yes.
So when you're talking about the whole chain, it is not just the distributors who are going to charge the 8% VAT. It's going to be charged to the common person, up to right to the person who is selling kerosene in Parliamentary.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
So that means it is not there only. They can recover anybody. So what you are trying to do with this VAT thing, CS, is not just recover money because you are going to be paying more as input, but you are trying to get more people into the tax bracket. Tell us that. Because the people who are down there, they are not in the tax bracket. And that's what you want to bring on. Tell us that. But I cannot agree that these figures you are giving us are truthful, because input will be more than what you will collect on VAT.
We can take you through the calculations. We can bring you. I think the KRA person is here who can take you through the process if we have time, Chair.
I can meet with him later.
Yes, you can. Okay.
Just hold on.
Yeah.
See, what is important, what Mheshimiwa Daud is raising is a serious issue.
Yes.
You know him, he is actually an expert in that field, and he has participated in the oil industry for a long time. And if Bwana CS, the computation you have given in terms of the impact of this is not as factual as we thought, then there should be a better way of presenting to this committee so that they are convinced beyond doubt that there is justification to, if this whole exercise will not add to the expected revenue, then there is no need of taking the whole hit. Yeah. Therefore, can we confirm that that computation is correct and the government is going to collect the revenue? If not, then there is need to rethink. Mheshimiwa Mudama?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, as you prepare to get the presentation
from the explanation of the CS about the road maintenance levy and the other levies that comes together with the fuels. Are you removing now, because you said we have been collecting around 60 billion or so, are you going to remove these fees from the oil price at the pump price, where Wananchi now are going to, all Wananchi are going to carry this burden of the fuel levies together with the new tax, which now Mheshimiwa Daud is explaining that it's a whole process. Are you, and again, is it going to affect the already initiated projects that are all over the country, so that then Mwananchi now suffers from the two ends?
Yeah, do I get your question? That
the question is, are these?
Let me try to get. I don't know whether the other members are getting. The understanding here is that this is additional tax, but it doesn't necessarily remove the other.
That's what I wanted to know.
But there was an explanation which he did, that the way this tax will be computed, it will be based on the cost before the other levies.
Yes.
Because if you levy, it's 8% on the current price.
The conversation happening there at the National Assembly's Finance Committee room with the CS for the National Treasury, that is Henry Rotich, are pretty much giving an idea of what's happening in the country, the concerns that are there. And just to get some context, if you thought that life is already hard and your pockets are already punctured, well, brace yourself, because you're likely to have an even tougher time. Now, that is if Parliament votes to approve the proposals in the presidential memo on the Finance Bill 2018. Now, there are two components to this memo. One is tax measures and the other is budget cuts. So let's start with the taxes. President Uhuru Kenyatta proposed to cut VAT on petroleum products from 16% to 8%, even as that still spells a more expensive life than what you had been living on. You're about to pay more taxes as the government seeks to raise more funds for its development plans. Let's start with one of the most basic commodities, that's kerosene, which is widely used by many people in the low-income areas. The president is introducing an 18 shilling per litre, tax on kerosene under the name adulteration levy. Kerosene currently retails at 97 shillings and 70 cents in Nairobi, which factors in the 16% VAT. Now, with the new levy, that figure will shoot to 112 shillings and 15 cents. That means the people at the bottom of the pyramid are likely to experience higher costs. Now, airtime and data services. I look at social media timelines and you will see complaints upon complaints about how quickly airtime and data bundles run out. Now, this is about to get even costlier as the president proposes that the tax moves from the current 10% to 15%. Now, currently, for every 100 shillings you spend buying airtime or data, 10 shillings goes to tax. But now, if the president's proposal is approved, you'll pay 15 shillings for that 100 bob cent. Now, next is mobile money. Billions of shillings are moved through various platforms every month. The president wants you to pay more taxes to move money across mobile platforms. In the 2018-2019 budget, CS Henry Rotich had proposed to increase the tax from the current 10% to 12%. But the president is proposing to increase this tax further to 20%. That's not all that's in the president's basket of surprises. If you're a betting lover, you will now pay 20% tax on all your winnings. If you win 100 shillings, for instance, the government is going to take 20 shillings, and unlike before, when you would take it all. But as the president proposes to tax winnings, he's offering reprieve to betting companies, slashing their tax from the 35% MPs proposed to 15%. So he's given some kind of relief to the companies who had been up in arms over the past year or so, and a number of months over the same. Now let's bring it home. The current budget proposes a housing levy of 1%, that's a 0.5% contribution by the employer and 0.5% contribution by the employee. MPs shot down this proposal. However, the president not only wants this tax to stay, but also wants to increase their contributions to a total of 3%. That's 1.5% to be contributed by the employer and 1.5% by the employee. And we shall be having this conversation in studio with the FKE Executive Director, who's in studio, but that's in a bit. Now, more better proposals for chocolate lovers. Every kilo of chocolate that you buy will attract a 20 shilling levy. This means that for every 1,000 bob you spend on a kilo of chocolate, 200 shillings will go to tax. We are curious to see the trends and spends around February 14th if this passes. Now let's go to the bank. President Uhuru Kenyatta wants you to pay a 20% levy on every transaction you make up from the current 10%. This means that, for instance, from the 30 shillings you're charged for ATM transactions, the government will now take 6 shillings instead of 3 shillings. This will eat into the bank's revenue, and so it's likely to be passed on to you and increase the amount you're being charged per transaction. Now, those are a lot of taxes to prepare yourself for. On the flip side of the memo, the president wants to cut 55 billion shillings from government expenditure. And for context, this is 1.8% of the 3 trillion shilling budget. The supplementary budget is cutting down the county government's budget from 314 billion shillings to 304 billion. The development expenditure will also come down from 677 billion to 642 billion shillings. The consolidated fund will remain untouched at 962 billion shillings. The recurrent expenditure, which has been a consistent point of concern and criticism, has been increased from 1.02 trillion shillings to 1.06 trillion, while the national government's budget reduces from 2.7 trillion shillings to 2.6 trillion. This then brings the total budget down from 3.026 trillion shillings to 2.97 trillion. That is what the president wants, and his wish may just be a command if the National Assembly gives his memorandum the green light. A lot of numbers and a lot of context to get into this, and that's why we have these conversations going on and explaining why you should care as a Mwananchi, as a Kenyan citizen, and why you should actually be concerned how your MP will vote. Will vote tomorrow when they get to the floor of the House to see whether they're going to pass this as it is or not. And we know there's politics around it that's at play, and we are monitoring that for you just to keep you up to date with the same. And now the National Assembly will on Thursday, that's tomorrow, debate the president's recommendations on how to fund the 2018-2019 budget captured in a memorandum submitted to the House yesterday. Kennedy Mureithi looks at the recommendations and tells us why the government is insistent on raising certain taxes to fund its budget, and he's actually currently where CS Henry Rotich is. But for now, let's listen to the story he did on the same.
In his memorandum to the National Assembly outlining the reasons he rejected the 2018 finance bill as passed by the House last month, President Uhuru Kenyatta warned of a budget deficit if his recommendations are not adopted. President Kenyatta says an estimated 35 billion shillings is projected to be realized from the revenue on the fuel VAT.
The member who is making her way, please.
The president argues that failure to pass the finance bill will stall the government's development projects such as infrastructure, education and affordable healthcare. In persuading MPs, the president has gone ahead to name countries such as South Africa at 14%, Ghana at 15% and Nigeria at 5% as countries benefiting from the VAT. He says the VAT on petroleum products is supposed to supplement domestic revenue mobilization. The recommendations have now been commuted to the Finance Committee for scrutiny and onward report writing and submission to Parliament on Thursday morning.
The people we represent believe we are here concerns VAT, and it is a matter over which I know there is a conscious decision by members. It's a matter we can vote straight away.
My minority leader is threatening me with the consequences of participating in this House pursuant to Article 117, which states that this House, there is freedom of speech in this House, and everybody will follow its conscience, and that this is a house of debate. Mr. Speaker, sir, he is talking about issues which are outside of this Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it is the same thing which the leader of majority, in a way in which he is trying to cast aspersions by telling us about this parliamentary democracy.
Some MPs insist Thursday's voting will be one to reclaim their independence from their political party bosses, while others say they are convinced these measures will go well into funding the budget deficit. Kennedy Muredhi, NTV.
Alright, and so that conversation, just a pointer to bring to light is that the numbers that we had for you in the first story that we did, which was about the things that the president wants in terms of the taxes that are going to be imposed on you if Parliament passes them. The full details in extensive coverage are in the Business Daily today, so be sure to get yourself a copy, and as the day goes along, you could easily log into www.businessdailyafrica.com to get the extensive coverage of the same. Now, let's go to the county of Homa Bay, where we have some of the views of the Wananchi in regards to this debate and these issues about taxes and whether they feel that the president is justified with his proposals or not, or whether they feel that this is an even heavier burden on an already burdened populace. Over to you, Bernardo Joan, to give us the latest from the county of Homa Bay.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. At first it was 16% VAT, and now it is 8% VAT reduction. When the 16% VAT was tabled in the National Assembly, the MPs, the National Assembly leaders rejected it, saying that it was not good for Kenyans, and they said that it should be postponed up to 2020. And after doing that, they expected President Uhuru Kenyatta to buy their idea, but their prayer didn't go well, as the president only reduced it to 8%. And now we are just going to talk to some locals here in Homa Bay town, just tell us what's their take over this 8% reduction that was made by President Uhuru Kenyatta. And remember, tomorrow the MPs will be also voting on this issue. And before we talk about that, let's hear from some of the locals here. Join me here. You'll start with your name and tell us what do you think about this 8% reduction by the president?
Yes, my name is Eliodo Yer. I'm a member of Homa Bay County here. And actually, when we go through the news, I heard that the president reduces the fuel tax from 16 to 18. I mean to 8%. And I want to say still we are not comfortable even with that 8%. And Kenya should even borrow this narrative of a situation where in Uganda, these people are taking the fuel from Kenya. And when you go to Uganda, it is tax-free. I don't know what, they need to copy this. Why Kenya? Why again Kenya? And these people are taking it from Kenya to Uganda. But Kenya is more expensive. They need to adapt to that. And I'm urging our MPs, that the people
All right, we apologize for that signal hang, but we shall be getting back to Bernardo Juang as we go along with the show, because the discussion is pretty much centered around what is happening there, and we expect a lot of reactions of what the different wananchi expect of their MPs. And we'll also be looking forward to the reactions of the members of parliament going forward and the kind of indication of the direction they want to take in regards to this. So let's cross over again, listen to the CS, Henry Rotich, the Treasury CS, Henry Rotich, who is before the budget committee, the finance committee of the National Assembly.
You know, more bigger base, and also dealing with challenges of what has been there and adulteration and all that. So I would respond in that manner. If you're not convinced with the calculation of the numbers, we can take you through, Mheshimiwa, the numbers are there, and it can.
All right. Provide. Yeah, for the benefit of every member here, I will appreciate, Bwana CS, if you can get us an example of the computation which brought that particular figure from KRA or from wherever it is, so that it avoids the benefit, it avoids the issues of doubt that as arisen from his question, because his question is from informed point of view. So we will leave it at that, but please get us the documentation as soon as possible. If you have it, the KRA expert has come. We have it, you can leave it with us. If you don't, then we will provide you time to bring it to our secretariat, so that before we make a decision, at least we get information.
Okay.
All right.
That's good.
Yeah, members, I think for now they are confirming that the computation is actually having taken care of all other issues around the marketers and the retailers, and therefore the net, what the government is be getting is around 16.5 billion, 17.5 billion, and initially at 16% it was at 5 billion revenue to the government.
Yeah.
All right. I think
just for information, actually, what I didn't mention is that in the issue that you raised about the small villagers traders, actually, they do not, meet the VAT threshold, so they will do not pose any administrative challenge for KRA. Yeah, I think that's a point that is important to.
All right. Yeah. So normally the retailers who are selling at the villages normally buy from the petrol station. So they pay the VAT there.
Yes.
And I think that's at the pump, and that is final for them.
Yeah.
So that they don't go and charge again. That's taken as a cost. All right. So if there is no additional question on the issue of petroleum, we can go to the third item. Yes.
This one, on page 8, we had talked about the Supplementary Appropriation Act.
And as we go along, we shall still keep getting in and out of the meeting there to hear what the CS has to say in regards to some of the questions that's been asked, because it's important, because the committee has to put together a report before they take it to Parliament tomorrow, to the floor of the House for debate and for the vote to be put in. But first, before we now get to our conversation, still in the same context, let's cross over to the county of Nakuru, where Bridget Singana is going to speak to some of the wananchi there to get the sense of what exactly they feel about this bill and the President's memorandum and the proposals of the executive in regards to the same. Bridget's.
Well done. As you have said, the eyes are now trained at Parliament, whereby tomorrow it is expected the members of Parliament will be making a decision on the President's proposal to reduce the 16% tax on fuel to about 8%. And now the residents are saying that there is a sense of life becoming difficult since that 16% tax levy is still in effect. But I'm going to be joined on set with the wananchi here in Nakuru County, who are just going to tell us how life has been since the 16% fuel levy has been in force. And you can start kwa kutuambia majina yako na wewe umeona kama hii asilimia 16 ambayo imeanza ushuru imeanza kuwekwa kwa mafuta imeathiri aje maisha yako kama mkazi wa Nakuru?
Hasa kabisa mimi kama mkazi wa Nakuru 16% imetuathiri sana. Especially sisi kama wafanyabiashara. Wafanyabiashara tunaona maisha imekuwa ngumu sana. Kwa sababu pia hata kufuel gari zetu wenyewe tumeshindwa kufuel gari zetu. Fika ni watu ambao mnafanya biashara nao, maisha imekuwa ngumu sababu mahali ambapo huwa wanatoa bidhaa zao, kama ni watu wa masoko, wakienda kuchukua vitu zao kwa masoko, gharama imepanda ya maisha. Vile kitu ambao walikuwa wanainunua kwa shilingi 200 sasa wanainunua 250. So sisi kama wananchi wa kawaida tunaona kwamba kama rais anaweza akaguzwa hii pesa ambao ameongezea wananchi aitafutie mali nyingi bali kwingine.
Tayari rais alisema kwa angependekeza wabunge waamue kuwa itakuwa 8% na sio 16 kama ilivyo awali. Wewe unaona kama kesho wabunge wataenda bungeni, maoni yako ni vipi? Unataka kuwa wakubali mwito wa rais ama wafanye vipi? Kwa sababu pia wameambiwa kuwa bajeti zao kama CDF pia itabidi ikatwe ndio sasa tuweze kufikisha ile malengo ambayo 16% kwa mafuta ilikuwa inafaa kufikia kama nchi.
Kwanza kabisa wabunge tuliwachagua pale ili waweze kuwakilisha mwananchi wa kawaida. Na wakati mwananchi wa kawaida anafinyika kimaisha, pia hao wenyewe hawatakuwa wanafanya kazi yao wakiwa comfortable, because in most cases in Kenya saizi watu wengi ni wa mapato ya chini. So mimi kwa maoni yangu ningetaka iwe 0%, asiongeze chochote, sababu hiyo pesa inaweza ikatafutwa kwa njia zingine zile za luxuries, vitu kama pombe, sigara, vitu kama hivyo ambavyo si watu wengi wanatumia, ziongezwe zile gharama. Haya magari makubwa ambao wanatembea nazo magazelas, ziongezwe mabei ili kama wako na pesa ya kutumia hao watumiwe pesa zao. Lakini kwa mwananchi wa kawaida, kama ni maoni yangu mimi nasema wabunge wasikubaliane na maneno ya rais. Sababu rais mwenyewe ndiye ameenda kukopa pesa zile ambazo sisi wenyewe hatuwezi tukagalamia. Ndio.
Sawa, asante sana. That was Ben Donga. He's one of the residents here in Nakuru County. Lakini tutaweza ongea pia na wewe ulikuwa diwani wa kale katika county hii ya Nakuru. Unaweza tueleza majina yako na pia maoni yako, jinsi unavyohisi hali ya maisha ilivyo tangu asilimia ya 16 ianze kukua kwa mafuta na bidhaa za mafuta.
Asante sana. Jina langu naitwa Councilor Joel Nyandieka. Na nimekaa kwa hii serikali kwa muda mrefu.
Tutasonga mbele kidogo tu.
Lakini kwangu nasema Wanjiko wanaumia. Kwa sababu ukiangalia vile wabunge wanafikiria kwenda kufoti on Thursday, na kulingana na ile maoni wametoa, sisi kama wananchi tumekasirika. Na wabunge wamechaguliwa kutoka kwa wananchi. So wabunge wanastahili kuwa kwa mkono wa wananchi. Wanjiko, the common man anaumia sana. Mafuta yameongezeka, petroli yameongezeka, mafuta taa yameongezeka, mafuta ya mboga yameongezeka, mboga yameongezeka. For example nikipeana example from Kisii up to Nairobi, it's around 2000 from 500. So niambie mwenye anabeba mboga ama kabichi ama sukuma ama nyanya kutoka Kisii ndio apeleke ukulima house, atalipa nini kwa mafuta? So mimi nilikuwa maoni yangu nilikuwa naomba ya kwamba wapunge wasibitise vile party leader wanawaambia, waende wabitise waseme ya kwamba mafuta ekuche 0, ekuche 0, rating ekuche 0. So mimi I'm not supporting wenyewe anasema mafuta yaongezeke. Hiyo 80% already it is not enough for the common man. So tunataka hiyo mafuta irudi chini. Na mafuta irudi chini, kila kitu kimerudi chini. Yes.
Asante sana. So Dan, I'll just speak to one more resident here. He was walking, I've just stopped him. Karibu sana, tuko kwenye runinga ya NTV na tunazungumzia vile hali ya maisha imekuwa tangu asilimia 16 yanze ushuru ya asilimia 16 yanze kuwa kwenye bidhaa za mafuta na pia mafuta. Wewe kama mkazi wa Nakuru, mbona mabadiliko gani kwa maisha yako tangu mafuta iongezeke?
Kwa maisha yangu mimi ni fundi. Lakini ile mpato nilikuwa napataga sasa sipati, naumia sana. Sasa bei ya mafuta mimi naona arudishwe chini. Ndio maisha arudi vile alikuwa.
Wewe ni fundi wa nini? Unafanya kazi gani? Na unaona kama hiyo kazi itakusaidia kama maisha imeendelea kupanda na mapato yako yamebaki yale yale?
Mimi ni fundi ya viatu. Kutoka 82 mpaka wa leo. Sasa kulea watoto nakuwa ngumu. Lakini mimi naomba president aingilie hiyo katikati hiyo nini ya uchumi.
President alisema badala ya 16% ikuwe 8%, na kesho wabunge wanasema wataenda kukubali au kukataa pendekezo la rais ambao anasema ni 8% na si 16%. Unaona hiyo itakuwa njia nzuri pia ya kusaidia wananchi sahi?
Kusaidia wananchi sio mbaya, sababu wananchi ndio wanaumia. Lakini wabunge sio kama wabunge wa zamani. Sasa maisha yamekuwa ngumu, hata mimi naona heri niende nyumbani kuliko kukaa town, sababu ile umri yangu nimefika, sio hiyo maisha yamekuwa ngumu sana.
Ungependa wabunge wafanyaje, wakubali au wakatai maneno?
Akatae hiyo maneno.
Ya rais.
Yeah.
Oh, Asante. Another is just rushing on said, Dan, just 1 minute. We'll just speak to another resident before I wind out. Unaweza niambia maybe what do you feel about your proposal ya kesho MPs to vote for the presidential proposal of 8% on fuel?
Okay, tukiangalia jinsi ambavyo maisha imekaa na Kenya mzima na vile economy imekaa, at least president wangejaribu kuangalia jinsi mwananchi anaumia, kwa sababu ukiongeza mafuta inamaanisha ya kwamba, kwa sababu hiyo ndio inakali all the production ya kila kitu, maisha ya mwananchi wa kawaida itaenda juu. So at least wangetafuta all other alternatives zenye zitafanya mafuta ikuwe chini, ndio production iweze kwenda chini, ndio mwananchi aweze kusaidika. So hakuna kitu wanatusaidia nayo, hata wakienda parliament wapitisha waseme 8%, bado mwananchi anafinyika. Kuna other ways mingi sana serikali inaweza tafuta ya kusaidia mwananchi, kwa sababu ikiguza roho ya mwananchi ni pale mafuta inaguza, kwa sababu all the factories, all the industries, hata kama ni unga inasogwa inatumia mafuta. Stima ndio hiyo mwananchi amenyanyasika nayo. So mimi nitauliza serikali hivi, na nitauliza president wetu Uhuru wakiwa na deputy wake, tafadhali watafute other alternatives. Kama ni kuona wataona ya kwamba tuko na njia mingi wanaweza tafuta revenue nazo, sio kuingia mfuko ya ule mwananchi yako pale chini. Kama sasa hivi mwananchi analala njaa na ni kuisha anaisha, na hii akiongezwa 8%. Asante.
Asante. Dan, those are very sensitive and passionate sentiments of the residents here in Nakuru County, and they feel that there are other alternatives to this issue of raising that revenue deficit that Treasury is going through. But from Nakuru County, from the people I've spoken with, at least 90% of them are of the opinion, even tomorrow the members of parliament should just shut down the president's proposal to reduce the tax from 16 to 8%. But we'll be keeping tabs on what's going on. Dan.
Bridget, some very passionate views there from the county of Nakuru on the same. And I'm told we have Bernardo Juang back. So let's cross over to Homa Bay County to hear the views of the Homa Bay residents. Then we shall be speaking in studio. Bernard. We apologize for that loss of sound, but we shall be incessantly looking for Bernardo Juang, because you know the views of the poll of the county of Homa Bay are as important as those of all others, and we shall be sure to bring this to you. And I'm now joined in studio by Jacqueline Mugo, the Executive Director of the FKE. Thank you for joining us. As the umbrella body of employers, what is your feeling, first of all, on this whole debate in terms of the VAT on fuel? And there's a lot more, but the finance bill, the President's memorandum.
There are two aspects to the debate that's going on in the country about the finance bill and the proposed changes and increase in taxes. One is the voice of the ordinary person who is feeling the pinch, the mwananchi on the ground, Wanjiko as we call them. And then the decision makers, the politicians, the executive, finance ministry, who obviously are also faced with the challenge of bridging the budget deficit that we have. But the approach that we are taking as a country is really hurting the very person that we want to protect. And that is the challenge that we have as employers. It's also impacting business, because we cannot keep increasing taxes. And there's such a wide variety of taxes that are being proposed that the message to the ordinary person seems to be, you will have to pay for all the sins and the acts of omission and commission of your leaders. And I think we've pushed the ordinary person to the brink, and we need to rethink that. The level of debt that we have in the country, sitting at 5.1 trillion, is too huge. the number of development projects, although good, that we have, are asking us to have so much money invested in it that we really need to think, do we want to focus on big development projects, which sometimes we have to keep going back to the drawing board in terms of seeing the value add, or do we want to address the issue about the cost of government, the quality of life that the ordinary Kenyan is having? Does he have access to health, to education? Can he meet his daily needs without feeling this pressure from government about taxation? So I think these two conversations need to be harmonized so that we meet the national crisis about financing the economy and also improving the livelihoods of our people and making it possible for Kenyans to do business.
Okay, just before we continue the conversation, let's cross over to Pumwani, where there have been the whole debate about the deaths of babies, which was the case brought forward by the governor of Nairobi, Mike Sonko. But right now, the Senator, Johnson Sakaja, is speaking. Let's listen in to what he has to say.
Yeah, Mheshimiwa, it's not about the resource. Yeah. Is this about the management? Because is it a high time now we can demand for the hospital to be in national government, not in county government?
Clearly, there's a management issue. That is obvious as a day and light. Some simple things. If you go back there where we are from, where the waste is supposed to be disposed, the last time the incinerator was working was more than 3 months ago. And we've even been told that there are times the person who has been cleaning and dealing with the garbage has found dead babies inside garbage, you know, surely. So there's a problem. That's why we're taking it very, very seriously as a Senate.
So,
yeah.
Now, since you have visited there, what have you observed?
So I want the rest to answer also those ones. Ndamaliza. Ndajibu. Answer na Senator. Okay. What wengine pia waongee.
Tell us what you have observed inside there.
Thank you very much. My name is Senator Kenywa. I'm the chairman of the Devolution Committee in the Senate. One thing I want to say that I'm perturbed. I'm perturbed by what I've seen because when you go to the incinerator where we have just last seen is that it started working like 3 days ago, which it leaves a lot to be desired. I would want to say that again, another thing that was of concern is that if you looked at the percentage of the kids who have died in that 1 week, it is about 5%, which is unacceptable. And then what we are being told is that the major issue is about everything that you are hearing is about funds. For me, it is about the management. The management, we should do something about the management. Under the Senate, we are supposed to do a work of oversight. And one thing I want to say is that we are bringing money in the hospitals. And I don't want to believe when somebody says we should take it back to the national government. The county government of county government of Nairobi, they're supposed to take their work seriously. Like for example, when you hear the incinerator is not working, simply because they don't have diesel, it is shocking. Because we are supposed to be providing diesel, and diesel, it is the cheapest fuel that can be provided. Alafu jambo lingine ambalo ningependa kusema ni ya kwamba ukiangalia hospitali yenyewe, ukiangalia watu wale ambao wanatembelea hospitali na miundo msingi ambayo katika hospitali yenyewe inaonekana iko nyuma kidogo. Kwa hivyo ukiangalia mambo hayo mawili ni mpaka kujulikana vizuri ya kwamba hospitali zetu tuongeze mijengo ya hospitali. Ukiwa tukifuatilia mambo ya ajenda zile 4 ambazo serikali inaweka muhimu, ni vizuri tufuatilie kabisa, tuweke misingi dhabiti ndio tuweze kuangalia haya maneno. Na mimi kama mwenyekiti wa ugatuzi nataka kusema ya kwamba county government and especially all the governors in 47 counties, they are supposed to be doing their work. That is what I want to say. Because what they are doing most of the time, they are talking about you don't have money, but they are not collecting. And the money they are collecting is not going to the correct places that's supposed to be used. Asante sana.
Wacha chairman wa health.
Ndio. hospitali hii ni ya kuzalisha mama wajawazito. Ukweli wa mambo ni ya kwamba hatutaki mochari kwa hasa, mochari sio kitu muhimu, lakini tunataka cold room ile pale kuhifadhi watoto, na vile kwa siku mbili ama hata tuweke misingi dhabiti, watoto wawe wakifa hata kama kutakufa angalau moja, si watoto 10 20. Kwa hivyo mochari si ya muhimu, si hasa wakati huu, si jambo la dharura. Jambo la dharura ni tukue na cold room, alafu ule mtoto mmoja ameaga dunia, tunakuwa na gari ambayo iko hapa inampeleka City Mochari. Asante.
My name is Senator Michael Mbito. I'm the chairman of the Senate Health Committee, and we have visited Pumwani Hospital today, and I can assure you we have noted that there are serious health challenges here. There's a serious management problem in this hospital, and which as a Senate committee we want to assure you that we will work on it. The governors, we will want them to pull up their socks. We have a situation whereby we are working towards universal health care. But at this rate, I don't see us achieving that if we don't get the support from the governors. We don't want to politicize health matters. We want to work to assist our people. Matters health need very, very concerted efforts where people come and really engage what the issues are rather than politicizing issues. We have noticed that here we have a problem. Every department we have visited here, there's a problem of staff. There's a shortage of staff. Yeah? We don't have enough staff here. Yet already some are already being sent home and all. So we want to see the governors getting proactive. And it's a high time that my committee will start actually calling these governors and asking them a few questions. Because there's a lot of things that we are seeing going wrong. The incinerator, the child mortality. We cannot be losing 5% of the children, mothers who come and give birth to children here. We need to reduce the infant mortality. So rest assured, as a Senate committee, we have your backs. We will conduct our oversight works. We will ensure that Pumwani Hospital is brought back to the standards we expect.
Chair, you've identified mismanagement as the main cause of the string of accusations leveled against the facility. Is it time the facility should be upgraded to a referral hospital for it to be managed under the national government?
Now, those are the issues. Those are the issues we need to sit down with the governor and his team and the management of this hospital to sit down and find out what exactly do we want. Is it a referral hospital we want, or what do we want? Do we need more funding? We need to sit down because already funds are coming, but we are not seeing that those funds are being used properly. Yeah, we have to see that are they accounting for that fund that they're already getting before we talk about giving them more funds. So we appreciate that yes, there might be no fund, we don't have enough funds, but we must work together with the little we have and confirm that what we already have is spent well. Yeah.
Are you aware yesterday?
So hiyo maneno tutaongea mbele, but saizi madaktari naona wako na uoga sana, hawataki kuongea na sisi kinaganaga, lakini tutaita kikao mzuri ili tukae tuongee na hawa watueleze exactly what the issues are. Lakini hii ardhi ya Pumwani, I can assure you it is secure. Hakuna mtu atachukua shamba ya serikali. Sasa
sorry.
Wacha basi chama najibu.
Mambo ardhi hatutajibu. I want to be blunt.
Some of the sentiments of senators who are at Pumwani Hospital in regards to the issues that have been there, and they say this specific one notwithstanding, there are issues there in regards to the leadership and some of the facilities there, and they're calling on governors to pull up the socks. And this again, maybe some sort of indictment on Mike Sonko, the governor of the county of Nairobi. But we have Charity Mwangi who's there, who shall give us an update of what exactly has been said and summarize the same for us. Now we take a short break, then we come back to our conversation in studio in terms of the cost of living and whether you should be concerned as a Kenyan in regards to what the employers feel.
This is NTV.
Welcome back to NTV Today. We took a short break, as you saw Madam Jacqueline Mugo taking a break, but we are still here and we are still going to be addressing the issues that affect you as Mwananchi in regards to the proposals by the President and by the Executive by extension in regards to the cost of living. As employers, what are the implications? We may have had some, but just to be clear, of first of all, the increase in fuel VAT. First of all, it was at 0. It's now at 16. The President has proposed for it to come to 8%. Do you support 8%, or do you feel that we should stay at 0?
We support the 0 position because our issue was an issue of principle, not quantum. Whether it's 16% or 8%, the issue is the impact it's going to have on the price of all commodities and services, because fuel is a key determinant in the price of all basic commodities. Once you increase it, it has a ripple effect, and there's very likely going to be an upsurge in the price of basic commodities, be it sugar, be it the basic food items that we buy, because the cost of transport, the cost of production has gone up, the cost of delivery, of moving your goods and services as a business person has gone up. So I think this will be passed on to the ordinary person. It's because of that potential impact of an increase in the price of fuel that employers said no from the beginning and tried to plead that we look at other options. Because once you have that inflationary push, then obviously it comes back to the same ordinary person you're trying to protect. For business, it becomes more costly. You have to look at your people numbers, because what the unions have already said is, look, we're going to ask employers to pay more. That's in the papers, and that always happens. Once the ordinary person is feeling the pinch, the person to be pushed is the businessman who's employing them. For those who are fortunate enough to be in employment, but we know that only a quarter of the 14 million or so Kenyans who are working in this country are in formal employment. So again, for the ordinary entrepreneur that is running a small kiosk, a small business, the cost of doing that business will be much, much higher, and they will not be able to make ends meet, as is clearly evident from the voice of the Kenyans that are speaking on this issue now.
All right, and I mean, we are about 55 shillings is going to taxes of the 127 shillings per litre of petrol that is there. What's your feeling on that? Do you feel it's too high, too much for the government to be taking?
The current price of fuel is too high, because if you look at the landed costs as released by the ERC, it's about half of what you're paying at the pump. So already it's being taxed fairly high. And I think it's a bit of an anomaly to say we're now introducing VAT on it. It's already being taxed, and the government is already benefiting from that money. So this is yet another tax on the same product. And what you ask is, what is the value add? Because VAT is value added tax. What is the value that is being added to petrol once it's in the pump? So I think because Kenyans are already paying a fairly high price for petrol, which in our view should sit at about half of what it is, if you look at the landed costs and the other costs as released by the ERC itself, we need to really rethink the price of petrol and diesel in particular, because diesel is the one that's used by most people. I think petrol, you may argue that one has a choice, but diesel is something that is used in production by the ordinary person running a mechanic shop or something like that. And I think we should, as much as possible, try to protect that from higher taxation.
And you've said that you feel that the price should be lower. Is there a proposed price or proposed amount of tax that you would expect the fuel to be at?
When we looked at the figures that the ERC had released on the landed costs of petrol, it's 57.82 per litre. Then they have other costs, including pipeline transport losses and storage costs, which are about 14.79. So when we added that, the cost of fuel should be about 72 or something shillings, but it's sitting at 127. So it should be roughly around 72.80 in our workings if you look at the actual cost of the product itself. That's where we thought it should sit, but the current pricing of it, even if it comes down, should the 16 go to 8, is still fairly high when you consider the actual cost of the product.
Do you have, by any chance, does FKA have any computation of what the average price of different goods would be after this imposition, the tax would be implemented?
We haven't done that yet, but of course the immediate thing would be the 8%. But then how that translates from enterprise to enterprise will be a function of the total cost of production, because it has impact on the inputs into that production. If you're manufacturing sweets or fast-moving consumer goods, you have to look at your inputs and then decide on the eventual pricing. So we haven't had time to work that one out, but we're just hoping that it won't be passed by Parliament, the finance bill, when it comes back next week, because other than fuel, there are also other proposals to increase a whole host of services for the ordinary person.
And one of them that comes to you employers is the housing fund,
yes,
which has been proposed. Initially, the proposal by Rotich, CS Rotich, was 0.5% by employers and 0.5% by the employee. But now it has come back as 1.5, 1.5.
The Housing Development Fund took us by surprise. There were no consultations at all prior to it being introduced in the finance bill. We did make our voice heard on the issue. We talked to Parliament, prepared a memorandum, and really tried to argue that to introduce a housing development fund at this stage without working out the details, it wasn't even clear how the figure was arrived at, because the initial indication was that it would be 0.5. Then in the budget speech itself, it was 1.5. Now we're looking at 3% if you look at what is being proposed in terms of contribution by the employer and the employee. But we have a challenge in terms of principle. We do agree that Kenyans deserve and should get affordable housing. But from an employer's perspective, we already do provide housing. Actually, the Employment Act requires an employer to give 15% of what an employee earns as housing. The employers who have schemes where they give loans to staff and they borrow that money and repay it. So this fund doesn't even take into account what's already happening in industry and what employers are doing. Same with NHIF. When you ask an employer to contribute an equivalent amount to NHIF when he's already running a medical insurance scheme to provide the same facility, the key question is, what are we financing? And back to the housing fund, the principle, the rationale, the structure of the payments, how they arrived at that quantum in itself is not clear. Two, we're saying we want to tax the formal sector person to go into a pool to build houses, which will then go through some lottery system to determine who gets that house. So you, the contributor, have no guarantee whatsoever that you're going to get a house. But nobody asked you whether you actually wanted that house. Because if you're 50 years old, 45 years old, you've been working for some 20, 30 years, of course you've invested in some house. So you may not actually need additional housing, but you're being asked to put money into a pool. And yesterday the CS was saying that if you contribute and by the time you retire you actually don't get a house, then you'll get your money back plus the interest. And now how's that going to work? Because the money you contributed has gone to building these houses. So the whole idea behind the housing fund is something that we find difficult to support at this point. It is for sure going to be pushed back to the employer, because the employee is saying it's government who wants me to make this contribution, so add it to my current pay so that it can go to government. It's a tax. You pay the tax as the employer. And you're paying tax to cover housing to someone you're probably already housing, or who has just a few years to go before retirement. The governance structure around the housing levy is not clear to us. And so we think the approach that we just need to tax to finance every agenda, the nice big four agenda that we have, which we support as employers, is a good agenda. But you can't finance it through taxation, because we want to tax everything to be able to raise money to fund these big ideas. That's the idea behind the housing fund. That's the idea behind the proposal that the employer pays to NHIF additional money If you take me, for instance, I've been paying to NHIF, never used it because my employer has a cover. Same for all my staff. Same for so many other companies. So the challenge, I think, is...
So is your suggestion that, for instance, with NHIF, that you have, if, say, Nation Media Group have a cover under it, that I should not be compelled to contribute to NHIF?
Yes, we wanted exemption for employers who have medical insured schemes for their staff, because the idea is to ensure you have a healthy workforce. But of course we know that there is a national challenge on medical, provision of medical services, provision of housing. There are very many companies that operate as businesses in this sector that could offer, I think, the same idea and meet the same objective that government has, which is a noble objective, without imposing tax on the ordinary Kenyans as is being proposed.
Okay, and now back to the housing one. What is your proposal as the employers? First of all, actually, not too long ago, within a month, within the past month, the PS Housing and Urban Development, Charles Hinga, was speaking to us on NTV some time back, and he mentioned that they had spoken with Kotu, who initially were against the housing fund contributions. And he says Kotu saw the sense in it, and actually they agreed. That's when they agreed to 1.5%. He also mentioned that that the government spoke with FKE as well as some committees of parliament. Did you have this meeting? If so, what came out of it?
You see, the first we had of the Housing Development Fund was in the budget speech. So we engaged the Committee of Parliament on it. Then we received an invitation from the PS Housing to go and hear from him the details of the proposal. And as a reasonable organization, of course, we dialogue with government all the time. We thought we need to go and hear his side of the story and the thinking, and also ask the questions that we have as employers, first of all on the rationale, behind the concept, the figures, and then some very crucial questions around the governance and the impact on business. What we agreed with him, because that was just me and a few staff, is that he needed to come and do a presentation to a big group of employers so that we can question and he hears from a business perspective the issues and the challenges we have with that proposal, and perhaps a different way of thinking in terms of providing housing. So it was an informal conversation presentation. We did not say yes to the idea, but we always listen to government. And when we're invited to go and hear detailed presentations, there's a very good track record of private-public dialogue between government and between the Federation and government. I don't think Kotu has agreed to this idea at all. If anything, what they're saying in the papers today is that the employer should now increase the salary of the workers to be able to help them meet the cost of all these proposed additional taxes. So there's a fundamental problem with the housing levy. I think we need to go back to the drawing board to talk about how to finance housing and what we mean by affordable housing, where will this affordable housing be, and how best to finance it through PPP arrangements. Okay,
we'll just get back to that in just a bit, but first we want to cross over to the county of Mombasa, where we have some matatu operators who are demonstrating, and it's not necessarily about the fuel tax issue, but let's listen in and hear exactly what their grievances are.
Tunatatizwa, tunataka kujua sisi usaidizi wetu tutasaidiwa na nani? Ndio swali hilo tunaomba.
Nilikuwa nikiomba hivi, kabla tuanze hii majadiliano, nilikuwa nikiomba hivi, tutoke kwa barabara, sababu tukao kwa barabara tunatarisha maisha yetu sisi wenyewe. Nilikuwa nikiomba twende pale kando, alafu mahojiano ikuwe kando ya barabara. Tunaweza tukafanya hivyo kweli?
Turudini nyuma.
Turudini nyuma. Turudini nyuma. Turudini nyuma pale hivyo kidogo tu. Unajua where our rights end, the right of another person begins. Tunaharibu right ya mtu, twende pale nyuma.
Lakini sasa hii ni biashara yangu hapa.
Twende pale, twende pale.
Labda kule. Shongani kule mbele. Simba. Tuna shida na serikali kuu, shida ni kaunti.
Kuna kiongozi alikuwa hapa wa MCA. Because I don't have their grievances. Let him bring the grievances so that I can alight to them. Sini sawa? Wacha atoe grievances zake kwanza.
Majina yangu naitwa Juma Renson Toya, mwakilishi wa wodi ya Mikindani. Ya UK kufikia saa hii imefungwa. Wameweka vibandiko vya no parking. Imenifanya mara kwa mara ninakomboa vijana wangu kule kotini. I've been paying a lot of fine for these young guys. But ilifika mahali nikawaita traffic inspectorate wa Mombasa County. Ni lazima tuje na suluhisho la kudumu. Mmenisikia? Suluhisho la kudumu ni kwamba kama pale mmefunga, ni mahali gani ingine ambapo mnaweza kutupeleka? Wakatuambia hapa katika hii Mwembe Tayari hapa. Baada ya Miritini, Jomvu, Mikindani. Sasa wakati tunaelekea kutafuta suluhisho hilo kwamba wale vijana waende pale, ikasemekana wakitoka pale wanasumbuliwa na inspectorate. Ukienda pale traffic police wanawachukua. Umenisikia? Kwa hivyo that is the bone of contention today. It's like hatuwasiliani because watu wa county walisema pale watu waondoke. Wakatuonyesha pale napo traffic wanawachukua. Kwa hivyo there is need the traffic inspectorate and the Kenya government traffic waekeze kukaa pamoja, kwa sababu kama ile mmenikatalia na hii mmenipa pia napo hapo, bado tunahangaishana. Hilo ndio tatizo ambalo liko hapa na linataka utatuzi, na nafikiri we want all the stakeholders on board wakuje waweze kutupa solution la kudumu. Thank you.
Mimi nazungumza kama National Vice Chairman Matatu Owners of Kenya, na nazungumza kama Chairman wa MOM Sacco ya Mombasa, nazungumza kama MOM Investment Director. Inayofanya municipality ni makosa kwa sababu kuna mpya aliyokuja hajui sheria zamani. Ilikuwako sheria zamani, parking zote ziliruhusiwa, lakini amekuja mwingine mpya hakufahamu yaliyokuwa yakitumika mbeleni, ameanza kubadilisha. Hata juzi tumekuwa Nyali, ilitokea fujo kama hili, tukasuluhisha jana kwa county, na fujo hili mpaka county ijue kama matatu ina haki ya kupewa stage. Waliosema hawa si urongo ni sawa, lazima haki ifanyike mara moja kwa upesi haraka sana.
The operators and their leaders are expressing their concerns on various issues in the county of Mombasa, and we shall be giving you those details in our subsequent bulletins. And this, again, partly points to the cost of living in the country, the state of the economy. And one of the things that's happening today is that the CS to the National Treasury, that's Henry Rotich, is before the Finance Committee of the National Assembly, speaking on the President's memorandum, which was sent to Parliament for them to approve, hopefully approving the President's, from where the President sits. And let's listen into what the CS is saying now and just get a sense of what's happening there now.
Looking at, first we are restoring our 7.6 billion. Of course it's still been levied now because the finance bill has not been accented to, because it is still in the old law. Yeah, but you see, as we accent to this, all these changes will take effect. Yeah. So we are looking at moving excise duty on fees charged for money transfer services by banks and other financial institutions, moving it from 10 to 20. What we were collecting at 7.6 will now collect 11.4 billion. And that is together with excise duty or other fees charged by financial institutions. There are also other fees that the banks are now charging, which we are also moving to 20. So all that gives us 11.4 billion. And then on excise duty on telephone and internet data services for both mobile and other telephone services, this is being moved from 10 to 15. It will net 7.8 billion. And so together, that is about, I would say, 20.2 billion. Yeah, around 20.2 billion.
All right. Any question, members? Yes, Mheshimiwa Adipo, then Kandie. Yeah, be brief as much as possible, please, because of time.
But yes, I just wanted clarification in case I'm not getting it well. Now, if motor dealers are importing vehicles, of course, money transfer will be involved. They will be charged 20%.
Motor deal.
Motor vehicles, a car. Yeah. If a dealer is importing the vehicle, money transfer will be involved. For which we pay 20%.
No, it is the fee the banks charge, not the transfer of the money. Now we have moved away from that. Yes, is what banks charge as a fee, which is by the banks. Yeah, you see, when you transfer money, they charge you. So we are just levying that fee.
But they are allowed to transfer this to the final consumer. Like if I buy the car, they will transfer that bit to me as part of the car payment.
So you are looking at the impact.
Yeah. So I'm talking of the impact of what this is. It means I'll be paying twice. I'll be paying duty on the car that I'm buying, and also the element of 20% of the fee they charge when they were transferring the money.
Yeah, typically, yes, the banks have been levying a fee. So for every transfer, maybe depending on the amount and all that, if they levy 50 shillings for any transfer you've made, we are saying instead of the 10% of that 50 shillings, we are saying it is 20% of the 50 shillings. Yes.
So what I'm talking about is passing it on to
the consumer.
What is the question?
So my question is that I'm paying duty, 20% will transfer to me, 20% of the it will transfer to me, and at the same time,
I don't know what
I pay the normal
duty. Even now you pay. You see, at 10. You pay. What we are just saying is that we are raising it to 20%.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Let me ask the
what is please be guided. Please ask your question. Because you don't go step by step. Ask your question.
My question is,
conclude that matter.
The fee, me as the buyer of the car, the price is increased for me. Because what I was paying before is not going to be the same.
But not for the purchase of the car. All right. Let me lessen your trouble. For every action done on issues of taxes, there is an impact. And there is somebody to pay. And it doesn't segregate whether you are buying a car, or sugar, or whatever it is. As long as you are transferring, it is now double. So just understand, Mheshimiwa, is now double. So it's upon you as a legislator to make a decision on it, whether it is a very good decision or no. But it is double. It is double. Yes. Yeah, it is double. So the impact on your post is double.
And not necessarily the banks will transfer sometimes. They can also absorb from their profitability. Yeah, they are also making, as you know.
Excise actually is borne by the person transacting. Yes. On whatever charges, because when you are transferring, you transfer and you will see their fee. You will see the bank fee. Let's say 200. Then below the 200, you will see excise, and you are the one paying.
Yes.
So it is actually hitting on it.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. The CS has talked about removing the bank 0.05%.
Yes.
Was it in the finance bill previously?
Yes.
And we removed it?
Yes.
And you are confirming it is not there, hidden somewhere?
No, it's not hidden. This is the only memorandum that is there, and you can see it is there.
Members, any other question?
Yes, substitution, exactly.
Because I want to wind up on this particular item.
CS Rotich still trying to justify and explain the ideology behind why the government is looking to raise taxes in this way. Madam Mugo, you listened to him, and we've seen the issues talk about like banks, like the higher, the 20% they want to charge on the fee. Are there any chances that banks will be, philanthropic enough and say they'll not pass it down to the user, to the customers, that is?
I think you can bet your bottom dollar or shilling that the banks will pass on that added cost to the client, the consumer, the account holder. That's what business does, because if government increases the taxes for them to balance the inputs and the cost of production or providing that service, they pass it on to you. So that is, again, us meeting the cost of banking. You've earned your money, you've paid taxes on it, you put it in the bank. Every time you do a transaction, you're going to have to bear that cost. So I think the reality is that the additional costs that are being imposed on businesses at the end of the day end up being borne by the consumer, the client, the ordinary person. Hence the impact that has on inflation. And if you listen to CS Rotich, many of the areas that are proposed to be touched by way of tax are areas that affect us. If you transfer money or talk to your friends now, you're going to pay more, because mobile money is a reality of life in Kenya today. And it's very painful, I think, for the ordinary person to have to pay more just to talk or to transact, to send money to their relatives up-country. You're going to pay more on kerosene and things like chocolates and betting. I think that one Kenyans can live with. But if you touch the essentials that they cannot do without, then it makes it very difficult.
And you earlier on mentioned, when to come back to housing for just a bit, that the Employment Act provides that 15% of salary, of what you pay as an employer to the employee, should go to housing allowance. So many people may feel that my payslip does not show housing allowance, yet that's what the law requires. Is it that employers are, shortchanging their employees?
There are two ways in which pay is structured. There are many employers who pay a consolidated salary or consolidated pay, which means you get one figure, it covers housing and the basic pay. Where there is a separate basic pay and house allowance, then the employer is required to pay 15% of that. The housing allowance should at least be 15% of the basic pay that you earn. This is more, I think, for the lower cadres, the unionizable cadres, we call them, and that's the minimum that the employer should pay. Even the minimum wage schedule has that housing is already covered in law as an element that an employer pays for. So when you introduce a new levy, you have to factor in what is already being provided. So I think for the senior managers and executives in an enterprise or in a company, you may not see the difference because it's all there, except for other allowances, which then would be distinct and separate from the basic pay.
Now, looking at all these things, and we are seeing that from what I'm getting from you, that the cost of doing business is going up inevitably, and from different angles. First of all, more significantly from the fuel, the fuel prices going up. So across the board, we are seeing that. So does this mean that we're looking at more retrenchments in the offing?
An interesting phenomenon has transpired, that although we are saying the economy is picking up from all the time we lost in electioneering and the period before that, and we are on a recovery path, economically speaking, those numbers of 3.4% growth or higher in GDP is not translating into actual monies into a business person's bank account. You're not making more money. It's not translating into an ease on inflation. So there's still a challenge. The cost of doing business was already high before the current budget deficit that we have, which we have to deal with. Redundancies have been happening, job losses have been happening in the last 3-4 years, quite a number, because lots of our sectors are in distress. If you look at the sugar sector, a lot of those companies have been in distress. There's been a ban on timber. A lot of employees have lost their jobs in timber. The financial sector, because of the changes that we had and the digitalization, greater use of technology, some jobs have changed, but they've also been job losses, and all the strikes and the impact they have had. So that has been happening, and we've been keeping those numbers. The concern, of course, is that we don't want to lose more jobs as we increase taxes on the few Kenyans and the few businesses in the formal economy. What we really need to look at is how to stir the informal economy, which is where most businesses are. Kenya is a fledgling young nation from a point of view of development. So we needed to look more at spurring the informal economy so that we can bring them into the tax bracket. Not many people agree with that, but I don't think you can keep taxing a quarter of the formal sector, which is just a quarter of the working population, to support all these huge expenditure plans that we have as a country. I think that's a self-defeating strategy, especially when you look at the big development projects that we have. How are we going to finance them through tax? You simply cannot. And we've borrowed to the teeth. So something has to give. We really then have to look at the cost of government, the expenditure that we have as a nation. We should save, cut down those costs. We know there's a lot of money out there, which Kenyans have stashed. We should bring in that money. The fight on corruption that the president is bent on pursuing, I think, is good. There was more money given to the agencies that would fight corruption and the institutions that would then hear those kinds of cases. I think that's a good move. We should keep that momentum so that we don't protect or somehow allow those who have squandered and plundered the economy to get away with it and punish the poor ordinary person to keep paying taxes so as to fill the gaps.
Okay, so what are we seeing in terms of retrenchments? Are we seeing more job losses coming?
I'm not a scaremonger because employers do retrenchments as a last resort, but it is inevitable when the numbers don't make sense. If you cannot transact business as you should, and there are higher costs, statutory deductions, because once a tax is introduced, as employers, we obey and we encourage our members to pay those taxes. If at the end of the day you cannot support the numbers of staff that you have, then yes, it's been happening, but not at an alarming rate. But there are sectors that are under distress, and they're certainly going to face harder times if we don't look at this taxation regime that is being proposed.
And so you said there are some numbers that you had been collecting as people who are retrenching. Do you have an indication of how many jobs have been lost within, say, the past year?
At the last count, there were about 20,000, but that's at a low rate because we looked largely at some manufacturing, the timber, and some agriculture, and a bit of the financial sector. But I think it would be higher than that. We're still in the process of collecting that data. And this is largely our members, because obviously not all companies would reveal that kind of information. But those are the kind of numbers that we have.
And that's the past 1 year?
Yes.
Okay. And now a concern that has come about that, has been an accusation on the end of, employers, that there's a pronouncement of the increase in minimum wage, but not everyone implements it. One, do you agree that this is true?
First, when the last minimum wage increase was pronounced on the 1st of May this year, the reality is that it's not been gazetted. We have asked behind the scenes what's happening, and I think the government is still working on it. Once it's gazetted, the misconception that most Kenyans have is that that 5% affects everybody. It actually only affects those at the minimum wage level. And not many Kenyans are at the minimum wage level. Most people are above the minimum wage level. Certainly for our members, they would be above that, because that's just the entry point into employment, which is currently sitting at just below 13,000 shillings. Most employers would implement it, because once the government gazettes it, we send it out to employers, and they comply. Where there is non-compliance, the Ministry of Labour comes in through labour inspections. I haven't had many cases in the last few years of an employer being sued because he did not comply with the minimum wage.
Because at times the concern is the person who would be hoping to get an increased minimum, the person who earns minimum wage kind of salary may not have the muscle, financial muscle, to go and sue. Maybe through their unions they would do that, but you find they're usually the people who we call wanyonge. So they don't know, they find themselves trapped because my boss has refused to raise my salary. I don't have an option. I have to fend for my family. So I'll still work at this, let me call it punitive fee, or salary or wage, but still not find, you know, any kind of reprieve.
A lot of those employees in that kind of wage bracket are actually members of unions. They would be affected by collective bargaining agreements, which have terms way beyond the minimum wage. But in case you find yourself in a scenario where you're being underpaid, you have recourse to go to the Ministry of Labor, the district labor officers, even the county labor officers now, where they deal with these kinds of issues. They would then come and inspect and ensure that there's compliance, because businesses are required to keep records, actually, which are subject to monthly inspections by government. We as a federation stand for fair labor practices, and we ensure, we encourage, we educate and raise awareness on compliance. So it's very important that there is compliance. But again, as I said, very few Kenyans actually are at the minimum wage. So when we fight for the minimum wage, what we do is raise the barrier of entry into employment for people who are not in employment, because those in employment, if they are on monthly wages, are above that. The minimum wage largely affects casual workers and people who do short-term work. And that is where the issue is, because we would like more and more Kenyans to access employment, and therefore the need to contain the minimum wages at some reasonable level, especially when you consider how high Kenyan minimum wages are in the region. We're way above Tanzania and Uganda. Rwanda, Burundi, I'm not sure whether they have a minimum wage at all.
But our economy is also larger. It's also larger than that of those. Would it be argued that it's only proportional?
It is not, because we are like twice Tanzania. That's the country that's most active in reviewing their minimum wage. Ours is like twice what they have. Uganda hasn't reviewed theirs for a very long time.
Okay, and so when we talk about these jobs being lost, and what does this then also then affect production? Because the productivity, that is, because I've got a company that makes, say, glasses, and I usually hire 100 people to be at optimal efficiency. But now I have to cut down the number of people who are working, so I go down to 80 people. So what then does that, you know, this kind of thing which you're saying, the kind of things that we're seeing that are likely to cause retrenchments, what are they? What's the long-term or the deeper ripple effect of the same?
You're very right. If you're forced to scale down as a business, look at the hotel industry. Sometimes you're forced to close down, send those workers home, and then bring them back as business picks up. Obviously, you're losing production for that time. You're losing business. Your hotel is deteriorating because it's not maintained. If you're a business and you're producing at a certain level and you're forced to reduce the numbers, then it affects your production unless you're investing in technology, newer technology, which might actually allow you to do more and get higher productivity. So it all depends on what is happening, because the people element will always be there in work, but human beings are also more complicated to work with. So where a company can use machines to deliver the same, then either we reskill our people to do different work, but if they cannot, then that company will have to use technology where it can, or scale down. And quite a number of companies have scaled down because they cannot continue to sustain the level of operations that they had.
Okay, and you'd mentioned about the minimum wage not being gazetted. What reasons have been given for that not happening yet?
No, I think it's just work in progress at the ministry. This is something that normally happens within a month or two. It was our hope that maybe government had a rethink and wondered why they
employers will always want for the minimum
the 5%, which but I think it's going to be gazetted in due course. And the beauty, for employers, that's not really, it will be backdated to be effective from the date it was pronounced. So there'll be an element of arrears of pay, which is difficult for business because you didn't plan for it. But that is what normally happens where there's a delay.
Okay, and now when we talk about the aspect of people getting employed, young people especially coming out of campuses and the likes, and there's a whole number of things that people need to get documentation so they can get jobs in some places. You're told to get a good certificate of good conduct, you're told to get KRA clearance, CRB. What's the employer's stand on this?
We have actually quantified what it costs for a young person to get those documents. And the reality is that it's expensive. It's about 4,700 shillings for you to get all those certifications. And I don't think they're necessary. If you're looking for a clerical job or an ICT support role in a company, you should just use your ID or your birth certificate, or, you know, to certify that you're a Kenyan. So I think when these requirements were put in the Constitution, they were aimed at constitutional positions, state officers who would be holding huge national responsibilities, not a young person starting off in life. Certificate of good conduct, the police don't even know you because you're from school. So I think we need to rethink. That again is raising the barrier of entry into employment, just putting hurdles to young people. So our plea has been, can we do away with all these requirements? Only confine them to people seeking constitutional positions or state positions in commissions and these huge public sector roles as commissioners, as you know, the state offices that are positions that are mentioned in the Constitution, so that we are sure that people we give responsibility at national level are people who have a good track record. But for young people entering employment, I think we need to rethink and make it easy. And as an employers organization, this is work we are doing behind the scenes, talking about it. We've quantified the numbers and realized that it's actually quite expensive for young people to do that. And the other thing is that it encourages corruption. Because you're going into a government office to ask for a certificate of good conduct or a bureau or wherever. We know that people then look for some element of facilitation to give Dann his certificate faster than he'll give Werimo, who probably doesn't have that money. So I think we need to do away with these elements that encourage a culture of corruption and make it easier for young people to just send in their applications on the internet and then sift through that and get back to them.
And speaking of corruption, you know, a number of times we've seen a lot of corruption stories out there that we cover them, you know, unashamedly, yes, about, especially in government. But see, government will not trade with itself. The private sector, you, the employers, are the people who run the businesses that are, are collaborating with the corrupt government officials. What is the state of corruption in the private sector, in your view?
I think what happens in the public sector is a reflection of what's happening in the country. And we private sector people cannot claim to be as white as grade 1 cotton. We know that a lot of the corruption that happens is through procurement in big projects and provision of huge amounts of supplies and services. And it is private sector that by and large does business with government, and we've addressed this issue. As private sector, we've committed ourselves to a code of conduct, doing responsible business. Many corporates have signed up on this. I think it was launched by the president and the private sector representatives. And that is something even globally, through initiatives such as the Global Compact, employers are committed to. The Federation is implementing with the International Organization of Employers responsible business initiatives, and we require our members to sign up to this so that we do not condone, support, facilitate corruption. So there I agree with you. As a country, one of the things we need to address is corruption. It is what has brought us to this position where we have huge gaps in the national budget and we're not able to meet it.
And so what do you do if you event that you find company X is part of, is one of your members? What is any action that the Federation can take on a company that is found to have been engaged in corrupt practices?
We have a code of conduct and rules and regulations. Of course, for a company to be proved to have taken part in an act of corruption, there needs to be the judicial process. They'll go through a judicial process. Until a company is tried and found to be culpable, as a federation, we would follow the same maxim, that you're taken to be innocent until proved guilty. Where we suspect, because a lot of the issues we deal with are unfair labor practice, maybe someone requiring a bribe to give someone a job, or the recruitment processes are not above board, because it starts with the small issues. The bigger ones normally attract the attention of the police, but these small ones, we do consistent awareness raising. We have programs with our members, and we have events where we share best practices, and we would not support a situation where a member was not complying with the national constitution or the federation's constitution, or is mentioned in some element of unfair labor practice, because we are part of the International Labor Organization and we follow that.
Okay, and you as FKE, in seeking to raise and sustain productivity, performance by various businesses, as well as the responsibility, you have put together over the past few years, and this year you also have the Employer of the Year award.
Yes.
And this year it is at the end of this week. What are you looking to achieve through these awards? Because at times it's got to a point people may become a bit skeptical about awards, that they are just there to, for whatever reason, there may not be to actually achieve what is put out on websites and what is said at interviews. What difference does this make?
We are very proud as a Federation of Kenya Employers to host the Employer of the Year Awards. We launched it last year. We asked ourselves those questions before we started it. It took us about 3 years to decide that there was space for this in the Kenyan market. And actually it received very positive response from companies. What we do is honor best employers. We are encouraging employers to have best practices starting off in 8 areas. Looking at the workplace, because that is what we're focusing on, to spur productivity. It's very different from the other awards that are there in the market. It is looking at leadership and governance, just what we were talking about. How do you govern your enterprise? How are you accountable from a point of view of good business practices? It looks at the performance of the company, at innovation and productivity within that particular enterprise, responsible business conduct, how do you give back to the community, inclusiveness and diversity at the workplace, which is a big issue, not just here but globally, the environment in which work is done, and then learning and development, and finally human resource practices and industrial relations. So there is a clear need for this. The process itself is above board done by PricewaterhouseCoopers, so the Federation doesn't get involved in it. And we are looking to unveil the second winner this Friday when we have the second gala awards of the Employer of the Year. And I think this will encourage the corporate world to compete positively amongst themselves, because it's for our members, it's only for our members. And they learn from one another. We produce a report for you once you've taken part, to show you where you did well and where you have opportunities for improvement. And we are very grateful actually for the support we got from the national media in being our media sponsor, and a host of other companies that saw value in this. What the winners of last year's award said is that they saw improvement in the climate in the organization, the morale of the workers, and the pride of being identified amongst all the other corporates in Kenya as the best in class.
Okay, and we find at times, in some cases, we've seen other surveys that are about company to work for, the best company, that kind of thing.
Yes.
But you find there's a disconnect between what the award or what the paperwork is saying vis-a-vis what the employees feel. So someone works for company X, and X gets awarded as being the best employer, but the employees do not feel that. Why is there a disconnect in that? Doesn't that kind of show there's a gap in just the whole process?
In some awards, in this one we actually visit the companies. Like last year's winner, we visited them before and after the awards, and you can feel it. It's there. It's an online survey that companies do, and they have to provide the evidence. And then you interview identified people within the company. If you're saying that you have learning and development, what is it exactly that you do? How is it documented? What are your employees saying? What's your track record? Because you just don't claim it, you have to prove it. And this one is a genuine award, which is not aimed at the Madoido, but it's really aimed at recognizing what companies are doing. And through this, the Federation is saying that employers have a very big role to play in boosting the productivity of the economy and in encouraging responsible business practices and the culture of consistent improvement.
Okay. And one of the things that, when you think about the conducive environment for people to work in, as an employer, you're looking at the well-being of the employees. And one thing that at times comes up, and it's often, I guess it's a tradition thing, a culture thing in Africa, is not usually talked about very much, is, for instance, like sexual harassment, for instance, in the office. And we see that it seems like there have been accusations, though again, like I said, it's usually a very hushed thing, that employers may not take these things as seriously, or may not take the action that is needed, or you know, or the people who've been affected may deserve. And partly because you may find it be someone who's high up the ladder who may have been the perpetrator or alleged perpetrator.
You're very right in that one. Sexual harassment has become a very big issue at the workplace, not just here in Kenya, but globally, such that it was actually a subject of discussion at the last International Labour Conference in June. And there is a push by workers for us to come with an international instrument on that, to deal with that. But our laws address sexual harassment. The Employment Act does. And where you have more than 20 employees, you're required to have a policy on sexual harassment and make it clear that that is not something encouraged at the workplace. And we've been doing training as an employers federation on what constitutes sexual harassment, because in the African context we seem to take a lot, we justify a lot of wrongdoing, you know, sexism in matatus at the workplace, and young people looking for jobs. And we know there are specific sectors that are prone to this more than others. It's there in our learning institutions, it's there in churches, unfortunately. So it is an issue of major concern, and has blocked many young people. And now it's not just females, but it's largely inflicted on females, but boys, men are also going through that. And I think it's something we need to encourage people to talk about. In many of the blue chip companies, there is a whistleblowing system. And I do know in a number of them, some very senior people have been dismissed from employment. But it's a painful process, because you have to be willing to say, of course, there's protection of your identity, but eventually this comes out. But I think young people, especially young people, need to be brave enough to say what's happening to them, so that we can rid the workplace of this vice. And one of the things we need to do as a country is to recognize it as a problem, and not whitewash it and justify it. Because a young person should be able to get a job or get promotion over time on merit, and not because they had to surrender to pressure from someone who has authority over them. I speak with passion about this because I talk to many young people who go through this kind of problem. But it is not something that we condone as a country or as a federation. The only challenge is how to deal with it and how to make it easier for people to report it.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that gives some good context. And actually, no, just before we let you go, what is your view on the national debt? We're at over 5 trillion shillings.
The national debt is sitting at 5.1 trillion shillings. These are figures 10 years ago you couldn't fathom. I mean, when the first scandal hit us, Goldenberg, I think it was 1.3 billion. We were in shock as a country. Now we're talking trillions and not thinking that it is shocking. That worries me. It's a lot of debt. I think we have borrowed to the limit. Apparently, this year alone, KRA is supposed to raise 1.74 trillion shillings from taxes for recurrent expenditure. 870 billion of that will go to service debt. There is no way that is sustainable. So my view is that we should rethink the huge development projects we have, whether it's roads, whether it's bridges, whether it's ports, whether it's rail, and stagger them until the economy recovers and we are able to service the loans. Because we cannot borrow more when we are struggling to repay. And you know, this debt has increased in the last 4 years or so. It's a very sharp rise. And it's a matter of concern. I think those of us who've been talking about it, looking at it from a business perspective, it's time for us to stop in our tracks and say, we need to do something different.
There have been some proposals that, you know, we should have, the president should probably drop some of his agenda from big four to maybe have just one major one or two. Briefly, are you in support of this?
I would subscribe to that, because we have, what, 4 years with 4 agenda items, with no money to deliver on them. And right now, the answer seems to be tax Kenyans more. Of course, the president hit on a raw nerve, and rightly so, when he said, I need to cut down the budgets for Senate, for the counties, for CDF. I don't even know why we still have CDF when we devolved. I thought the devolved government structure was meant to provide all this. So we need to reduce the recurrent expenditure, but the development expenditure budget is what is putting us on the brink. And I think as a young country, we know that Rome was not built in a day. You're seeing Zambia having to give up some of its strategic state institutions to the Chinese because they can't service the loans. Now, Kenya doesn't want to get to that level. So I am not an advisor to the president by any means, but just looking at it, Kenyans who are saying that, I think are seeing if you want to leave a legacy, let's pick one or two and just put all our resources there. And then you'll be able to say that this is what we achieved in the 4 years. Because 4 years is a very short time. So I would actually agree with that and see if we cannot put our national resources. If it's health, let's focus on health and provide that, because that's a big issue for Kenyans. A healthy nation is a productive nation. So let's put our money in health.
Okay.
And be able to have results at the end of the 4 years of his term.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline Mugo, Executive Director of the Federation of Kenya Employers, for speaking to us and giving us your views and those of the Federation and the employers at large in regards to the issues that are going on. And like you said, there's the Employer of the Year Awards on Friday.
Yes, 21st.
21st on Friday. So maybe your employer is the best. We hope you agree with them, because if you don't agree with what FKE has done in the, and alongside PwC have done, then it becomes an indictment on the process itself. But we're looking forward, and as she said, Nation Media Group is one of the partners of this, and definitely something to look forward to. My name is Dann Mwangi. Thank you for joining us on NTV Today. But it continues the update at 1 p.m. in not too long. Have yourself a great afternoon. See you then. Thanks for joining us. My name is Dann Mwangi and this is the news update at 1 p.m. Now, the CS for the National Treasury, that's Henry Rotich, has been before the National Assembly's Finance Committee responding to the questions over the finance bill, the proposals in the President's memorandum on the same, and this session is still going on. So let's listen into some of the things that he's saying about the things that will affect you and your pocket.
Now, yes, I'm coming to that. I just wanted to tie you to that, the report that this will come into effect. If you see in the memorandum, we have said regulations gazetted by the Cabinet Secretary for Housing in consultation with the National Treasury, so that when they are implemented, government will be ready to make its contribution at the time. Now, in terms of the contribution, we are looking at with about a wage bill of about 650 billion, 700. Yes. Billion, yes. Wage bill for government. We're looking 1.5% of that. I think we have been looking at something like about 10 billion as a rough calculation per year contribution. So, but obviously, with the regulations, we expect probably the half-year impact in this financial year would be probably half of that if the regulations comes into effect, say from January, depending on when the CS housing will gazette. Right. Then we will provide in supplementary to the government contribution for that.
All right. Dawood and Atandi.
Thank you. One of the questions was what Mheshimiwa Kombe asked. You are going to tax it at the prevailing rates. Yeah. I'm told it is payee rates, right? The one you are going to tax, well, that's what Mr. Kapsuna said. Yeah. Now, you have not put a provision here when somebody now after retirement, after how many years? Because we are aware our retired teachers have not been paid for the last 10 years.
How soon will they be paid?
So these people, once they opt out of this and they want cash, how long will they have to wait? Or will they have to wait from their grave? We need to put, if it is within 1 year of them expressing the desire to have their money, can it be put?
We will put in the regulations.
It will be in the regulations. Yeah. But you are assuring us they will get the money.
Yes, the law is already. If this is passed,
those teachers who are waiting for their pensions all these years and still haven't got it.
The issue of the teachers, as they retire now, they get their pension.
All right, some of the issues that affect you in regards to what the President and the Executive by extension wants in regards to the taxation measures being taken to ensure the government can finance the budget. Some of the questions there that have been responded to by the CS, some of which have holes poked into them, and we shall be giving you more details. Kennedy Muredi is following the proceedings and will give us a comprehensive report on the same. Now, at Capitol Hill, the Raila Odinga, the NASA leader, has been having a meeting with some youth leaders from the country, discussing a number of things, and is about to begin addressing the media on the same. And we shall be crossing out Capitol Hill once he begins to speak on the same, just to get a sense of what was discussed. And it's likely that it's about some of the issues that have been in the news and the latest in the public domain in the past few days. And so we expect Raila Odinga to speak on the same and just give an update of what transpired at his meeting with the youth leaders, who he was having a meeting with at his Capitol Hill office, which is in Upper Hill in Nairobi. And this again brings to the fore the question on what he feels about the memorandum sent by the President, the fact that he expected the President to to approve the postponement rather of the 16% VAT on fuel, and NASA then gave conditional support. So it seems there's some bit of looseness in the handshake, it seems, but we wait to see whether he's going to address this as he speaks on the same, because some of the measures here, like I've spoken just a short while ago with the FK Executive Director, may have an impact on jobs, and the jobs are the most affected people by unemployment are the youth, some of whose leaders he has been meeting this morning, and now he begins to speak. Let's listen in.
Side and from the NASA side, the ODM, they came to pay a courtesy call on me and share certain issues of concern and also of mutual interest to them. And they just came as Kenyans As you know, we always say that the youth are the future of a nation. The youth, if they're united, can bring change to a country. We, in the Building Bridges initiative, believe very much in the power of the youth. And we believe that if we can unite the youth of this country and inspire them with the ideals of the founding fathers of our nation, Kenya can go places. I have had useful discussions with them, and I'm going to give them a chance to brief you about what they told me and what I've also told them. But this is the beginning of a conversation that we intend to have not only here in Nairobi, but with the youth all over the country. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. Honorable members of the Fourth Estate, I will start by bringing to fore the quotation of Aristophanes in his play The Frogs. Said that if we must rise with honor, and if we fall, so it must be. Today we have come here so that the spirit of handshake can continue reminiscing in the ground and also getting to the core of the intended people. Every nation is built by the youth, and as the right former Prime Minister has.
Some of the youth there speaking after Raila Odinga in regards to the meeting that they had, which from what Raila Odinga said is in regards to the handshake and the Building Bridges initiative, which had concerns about there not being enough youth representation in the team that's leading those efforts. And so this is likely to be one of those things, that one of the issues that has been brought to the fore. And Zainab Ismail is on location and shall give us a comprehensive report on the same when she gets a chance to, and once it's over. Now, in Parliament, once again, what was happening was a discussion in regards to the sugar scandal and the bribery allegations of MPs, where we had allegations that some MPs were being bribed to shoot down the report on the sugar scandal, which was by the committee, that the joint committee that was co-chaired by Kanini Kega and the Agriculture Committee chairperson. And now we know that one of the MPs has actually admitted to that. That's Didmas Barasa, has actually reiterated the fact that he was offered a bribe, but other MPs have come and said that they were not offered bribes. They've basically turned down the same. So let's listen in to what's happening there now.
Not Murunga. Honorable Speaker. No, just a minute. Please understand things. Yeah. Murunga corroborated the issue of corruption and money. The question as to whether Murunga did not corroborate that Didmas Barasa was in the company of John Waluke. Yeah. So maybe Honorable Waluke, now you have heard the whole story. What is your reaction to that? Because that is what you can see. What is reported that it says he was in your company.
No, I was not in his company, Mr. Speaker, because he was sitting on the opposite side on that very day, because he was on the opposition side and I was on the government side. So there was no communication. I couldn't communicate with him when he was on that side and I was on the government side, because it is far unless he crossed the floor to come on where either I crossed the floor to go on the opposition side. But as I was on the opposition side, I was on the government side. So I did not see anything. And even when I met him here on the corridors of the of this parliament, I asked him if he was given money. He said he was offered 10,000 and on a blue envelope. And I asked him if indeed he received 10,000, because I just asked him an hour ago, and he said indeed he was offered 10,000. And I asked him where was I. He said he was not. I was not there. And yeah, this is what I'm saying. We need to tell the truth to the public. But he said he was offered 10,000 in a blue envelope. And I asked him, did you take the money? He said no, he did not take because the money was little. And I asked him if it was more, like how much he could, he could have received. He said if it was 100,000, he could have received, but it was 10,000 he did not receive. But he wanted if it was 10,000, he could have received. So I even don't know, Mr. Speaker, what he was saying, or Mr. Chairman, but I was not with him. I was not in his company, and I even don't know why. Even I've been called here because this is something that is shameful for us as members of Parliament to allege something that is not true, that is not there, and I've warned even Honorable Titmas Barasa that I think is going on a wrong way or wrong direction, because he's talking of something that I even don't know, and I can deny. Me, I'm always very honest and very trusted, and I can say that I was not in his company.
No, Honorable Aluke.
Yeah.
He told you that he was offered.
So John Waluke has denied the allegations that he also was offered a bribe, and these are allegations by Kimilili MP Didmas Barasa, who was there earlier on. He was the first person to give evidence on the sugar report, who was giving evidence on the sugar report bribery claims before the Powers and Privileges Committee, which is being chaired by the Speaker Justin Muturi, and he insists that Fatuma Gedi, that's the Wajir MP, attempted to bribe him with 10,000 shillings to shoot down the report. And Didmas says that he saw Fatuma also try to bribe MP John Waluke, who was now responding to those allegations, which he has denied. And this was not the only MPs. Another MPs who've been before the committee. We also have Muhoroni MP James Onyango Koyo, who told the committee that he has no evidence of sugar report bribery claims. MP regrets, claiming that the Speaker gagged the debate. And we see a number of MPs now distancing, those who've been there distancing themselves from the allegations and leaving Didmas Barasa so far as being alone. Now, moving on to a sad story, and a grieving family in Murang'a County is seeking for their kin who was shot and killed by a police officer under unclear circumstances. The late John Irongo was killed on Monday at 3 p.m. while hawking bread at a police station.
On Tuesday evening, the family of the late John Irungu, who was shot dead by police officer in Murang'a County, made their way to Kigumo police station in an attempt to seek justice for their son's death. Irungu is said to have been at the police station hawking bread. The officer on duty was seated under a shade enjoying a drink when his AK-47 went off. From the signs at the scene of crime, the bullet appears to have gone through a piece of wood before hitting the victim.
Naomba serikali ifanya uzuguzi na nataka isunguze na ukweli utendeke. Yo officer asunguswe, haki ya mtoto yangu ipatikane.
The 20-year-old died on his way to the hospital. The police officer fled the scene of crime, but is reported to have later presented himself to Buruburu police station.
We are still investigating to piece together the information on what happened, because we are not sure of what happened, because the only person now by the time we were there, the only time we could get information from should have been the officer. But now that he was not there, the only person who had remained with the deceased.
Achieng Wimbley, NTV.
A very sad story. Now, 2 government departments in Wajir County are involved in a conflict over uncollected garbage for the last 5 months. According to the county's prison department, the town administration has failed in its duty to collect garbage at the prison staff quarters. County Prison Commandant Ali Mathei says all efforts to have the concerned department's garbage disposed have failed. Mathei allowed prison officers to engage inmates in cleaning up the area, saying the uncollected garbage is a health hazard to the prison officers and families living at the staff quarters.
The county secretary is aware. He had that document, but unfortunately, he has not yet replied up to date. This is a health hazard. Our members of staff and their families are in danger. So we are trying to do our own ways of disposing this garbage.
Kenyans online were angered by Busia Governor's Hospital Jamong's statement in an NTV expose that aired on Sunday night. Jab of Misery highlighted the plight of 28 children in Teso North who suffered paralysis after malaria injections at the dispensary. Now Governor Jamong termed their plight as, quote, an allegation, even though it is clear that the children can hardly walk and sleep due to pain.
On Sunday, NTV aired a feature titled Jab of Misery, which highlighted the plight of 28 children of Kakapel location, Teso North sub-county, who were affected by a malaria jab in July 2015. According to medical records, the children developed a condition called sciatic neuritis after they were directly injected on the sciatic nerves. The children have deformities ranging from leg paralysis and foot drop, where a child can hardly lift the leg at the ankle. Kenyans on Twitter and Facebook expressed their displeasure with what they termed as Ojamong's insensitive remarks.
We cannot punish her on the basis of allegations. Even if the courts passed, if they brought their rulings or orders, it would be very difficult to respect them, because on what basis?
On his part, Mwaura said, I am not surprised by Ojamong's arrogance. He represents a majority of leaders in Kenya. Benedict Muduvi asked, is Ojamong a parent? Does he care for his kids? Jilly asked, those children are represented by a village elder, chief, ward administrator, MCA sub-county administrator, MP, county administrator, senate, ward rep, and governor, and none didn't see they needed help. Amos Langat wondered how on earth can one continue working when the person has caused permanent paralysis to innocent children? That nurse should be held accountable, and Ojamong should act like a human being. Out of the 28 children, 17 suffered permanent disabilities. The courts ruled in favor of the parents and the victims, ordering the county government to pay 38 million shillings to the children who suffered paralysis. 9 months on, the families are yet to be paid. Rozongoi, NTV.
Now, the Senate Health Committee alongside Nairobi Senator were at Pumwani Hospital following the allegations of dead babies under negligence and the countering concerns on the same. And so, Charity Mwangi is at Pumwani Hospital and now joins us to give us an update of what happened after what exactly the Senator said. Charity, what's new in this whole back and forth in regards to Pumwani?
Thank you very much, Dan. Like you have so well articulated, we have been here since morning and it has been quite a busy morning for us. We received a briefing from the nursing staff here who have complained about the lack of facilitation in the execution of mandate. We will be talking to some of them in our bulletin, and we have realized that there are very many problems facing the staff here. And a few minutes ago, the Senate Committee on Health, led by Nairobi Senator Johnson Sakaja, they toured this facility. They also received a brief from the acting medical superintendent, Betty Minor, who gave them a small narration of what happened and what caused the discovery that was shared by the Nairobi governor. And so they are planning to call the Nairobi governor to Senate to explain what happened, the discoveries that he's made, also to scrutinize the budget allocation and how the money is being spent here at the Pumwani Hospital. We've also received a donation from Nairobi County. They have brought here some refrigeration facility to help in the interim, even as the county considers to construct a morgue or a temporary mortuary for this facility. Back to you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Charity, for that brief and update, and we hope that justice is found and that that facility can actually get the support and the resources that it needs to become an ideal facility for health. Now, internationally, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has promised to make a historic visit to South Korea's capital, Seoul, after a summit with South Korean leader Moon Jae-in in Pyongyang. The visit by Kim would be the first by a northern leader since the partition of the peninsula.
South Korea's President Moon Jae-in and the North's leader Kim